All right, we have our Patreon Q&A poll going on. Go to patreon.com/CU podcast, Ian, and you get some good goodies there. Like Ian has a writing once a week. He has a hangout once a month.
Doing my hangout this Saturday, September the date.
All right.
And what's the date?
Well, by the time this comes out, though, it might be after that. But if you listen to it, you're going to hear it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, audio, you'll hear it.
Saturday the 15th. This Saturday the 15th at
All right, so
noon.
The voting is in.
Meh.
In third place at 13% only. What game should get a remastered version similar to Streets of Rage 4? No one cares at 13%. 37%. If you could do a one-room mini arcade, what handful of games in pinball would go in it? 37%. And at 50%, the winner, most overrated popular gaming console from the past. Ian, take it away.
Most overrated popular gaming console from the past, Super Nintendo.
Explain why you think it's overrated, Ian.
It's rated. I mean, it's a good system.
It's a good system.
It's a good.
So you give it a solid 7 out of 10? Is that what you're going to give it?
6.5.
Oh wow! You won't even give me the 7.
I mean, I'd possibly give it a 7. I mean, if we're going by like modern day IGN rating standards, sure. If we're using like
modern days, use a regular 7. A 7's
okay. If we're using like a schoolyard, like C
no,
is
not
70.
schoolyard. Schoolyard is failing. 70's a D. Was a D in my grade school.
60 was a D where I was. 70 was C.
Public
80
school.
was B. 90 was A. Sure, fine. They're a 7 out of 10. No, it's a fine system. I like action and platformer more than most anything.
I
And
gotta bring up the list of games now. Okay, go on.
Genesis has a lot of that. The Super Nintendo's standout titles are RPGs. And that was great for me back then, but I don't have the time so much now to go
so you're
back
saying
and play
there's
all these
no-
classic RPGs.
So give me examples of like 5 Genesis games that there's not a comparable one on the Super Nintendo. You gotta back this up. People are gonna come for your head. You gotta back it up.
I'm just saying that Genesis in general has more games like...
And the libraries are comparably the same size, like 700 Genesis, 800 Super Nintendo, something like that. Or they're roughly the same size.
When I look at like the Genesis library, I can find stuff like Rise Star, Toe Jam and Earl, the Mickey Mouse games that I like, the Castle of Illusion and World of Illusion.
The Haunting.
Well, that's an interesting one. I like the Aladdin better on the Genesis. Better version of RoboCop vs. Terminator. The Rocket Knight Adventures 1, which isn't on Super Nintendo. The Streets of Rage series, which I like better than what's on there. The Sonic the Hedgehog games. Basically, and then you've got your shooters in general, your Truxton, your Musha. I mean, that sort of thing. It's just
there's shooters on Super, but they're not
as great
caliber.
And,
you can get
it's not the
R-Type
same
on there.
caliber. Just
you can
like
get UN Squadron. You can get stuff like that.
yes, but not as many. Not the same caliber to me. Also, Strider. It's a more arcade-focused machine. Sega has always been a more arcade-focused company.
Except for the arcade ports of stuff like Mortal Kombat 2, which is a hell of a lot better in Super Nintendo.
Sure.
Street Fighter 2 is a hell of a lot better in Super Nintendo. So the fighting games on the Genesis, I would say, are not close to the Super.
Overall, it's just where my taste lies.
Sure, I'm just saying though.
Yeah. Super Nintendo's a
sports
fine
games
system.
though. Sports games Genesis.
NHL 94 on the Genesis
is better than
is
the
probably
Super Nintendo
the best.
Not that the
hockey
Super
game of
Nintendo
all
games.
time.
Not that the NHL Super Nintendo games are trash. They're just not as good as the Genesis.
Yeah.
They're just not as. They don't feel as right. Things like that. But you have Tecmo Super Bowl. Oh, it's on both systems. That's right. But you're gonna make me defend stuff like Mega Man X series. You're gonna make me defend that.
I didn't say it's bad. I just said it's
You're gonna make me
overrated.
defend that? Jesus.
No, this is the thing. Overrated does not mean bad. Overrated means overrated. I like the Super Nintendo. I think it gets blown too hard.
NBA Hang Time was awesome on the Super Nintendo. It's close to not. Well, the arcade is toned down. N64 one's the arcade, but that's a good one. There was a lot of weird stuff on the Super Nintendo that didn't show up on the Genesis. You had games that some were bad, some were good. Some were bad, like Bebe's Kids. Like weird licenses. Time Tracks is actually better than average, according to a certain Super Nintendo guidebooks coming out. So they took there's some weird licensing that happened. I think companies saw Super Nintendo still as like the family system and went to them, never bothered with the Genesis.
Yeah, there's some Viacom stuff that never came out on the Genesis, like Rocco's Modern Life never came out on the Genesis.
But you're right. It is a console where I think, and I said this in my Haunting Path Names review, Genesis took more chances on stuff. There was definitely games that would never, like The Haunting, would never have come out in the Super Nintendo. It was just too bizarre, too adult, too weird, too gory in places that would not have come out.
You get the Genesis Ghostbusters. You get,
That's right.
I mean, you just get Altered Beast. Like I said, you get a lot more action arcade platform Twitch type game experiences that when you really sit down and look at the Super Nintendo library as compared to Genesis or even the original Nintendo. And I think if someone were to come at me for that and I say, well, no, just compare the number of those games from the NES to the Super, and that's kind of where that happened for me as a kid as I became a bigger fan of the Genesis. You saw that there was a shift kind of in their focus on what type of games, at least, especially Nintendo, even as a first party. You went to these longer, more story focused games, and Genesis still had a lot of the pick up and play fast action stuff.
All right. The most overrated popular gaming console. Oof. That's tougher for me because I don't think NES is overrated. I don't think the Super is. Genesis, I think, is rated right where it should be. Man, that's a tough one.
I always want to say N64, but I don't know if it's... I feel like it's getting to the point where...
That's too easy to say, though. I mean, okay.
I used to want to say... but
is a GameCube overrated? Or rated properly?
The GameCube seems to be rated properly. I don't think the reason why I would almost say N64 now is it's getting to the point where a lot of people in the store talk it up real big because it's that sweet spot for people who grew up with it.
Yeah, okay. You know, it is the N64. I was going to say Neo Geo, I think it's a little bit overrated.
It is.
But that's not, wasn't popular. N64 is overrated. And yes, we're at the point now, like Normal Boots is doing like their tournament of champions right now for Super Nintendo games. Like the 16.
I saw Pokemon Snap should win, but it didn't.
But here's the point, though. Once you get past like their list in the tournament, there's not a huge hell of a lot more you need to play on that system.
Sure.
Like you're pretty much, you get to like 20 games on the N64, you're pretty much set. And I've always maintained that. You're pretty set.
They didn't put Snowboard Kids in.
Well, join Normal Boots, Ian. You can get into the debate with Gerard and Jared and all of them. But when you look at the N64 game list, you're not really seeing a bunch of games that people are clamoring for remakes or remasterings of. You're not really have a lot of franchises that are still alive to this day that are like, oh, yeah, I remember that fond... give me an example here, Ian. Or show me one that... I don't know, Chopper Attack. Do people say, come to the store and say, I want to copy a Chopper Attack?
People do, and when they do, I look at it and go, I've never once been excited about even thinking about trying this game or looking into it. But, it's probably one that they had growing up, and they're like, oh, I'll take that.
Mike Piazza's Strike Zone. So even the sports games were like one-offs. They weren't like...
I can probably tell you on 3 fingers how many copies of Mike Piazza's Strike Zone I've sold.
Was it a good game? Maybe.
Who knows?
You do have like this sort of like ones that are kind of still remembered, like Mystical Ninja on the system, but for the most part, the N64 was a weird hybrid sports and racing system with a good first party games and a handful of like third party games. I mean, that's basically what the system was.
Yeah.
When you get down to it, I mean, half the system is racing and sports games. It really is.
Yeah. For 2 Nintendo fanboys, we both did just call out Nintendo systems is overrated.
That is true. Yeah, we did. Well, I would argue that I think mine is a little more of a slam dunk versus the Super Nintendo. But, there it is. N64 and Super Nintendo. But, I think Super Nintendo is fine, personally. Enough to do with God.
It has to be rated a lot to be overrated to some.
That is true. It has to be highly rated to be overrated. That is true. It can't be lowly rated to be overrated.
Yeah.
All right. Someone's coming to the store to get let's see. They're going to come in and get Indie Racing 2000 soon.
All right.